Hello, and welcome to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Each week, we set the table for a discussion about recipes and stories from the authors of The Joy of Cooking, kitchen victories and misadventures, and most importantly, what we are cooking and eating right now. We're glad you've joined us at the table today. I'm Shannon Larson, home cook, ardent Joy of Cooking user and fan, and steamed vegetable enthusiast.
I'm Megan Scott, co-author of the 2019 edition of Joy of Cooking. I'm a food editor by day and avoider of dish duty by night. I'm our in-house meal planner, and I know exactly where everything in the fridge is. No shade to anyone else in our household.
Yeah, right. I'm John Becker, fourth-generation co-author and steward of The Joy of Cooking, America's oldest family-run cookbook. I try to avoid crying when I cut onions, but sometimes it doesn't work, and I am secretly thankful.
It is really cathartic sometimes when you're cutting an onion and you just have to cry. Like, you can't avoid it.
Yeah, you can't avoid it, and you might even need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm of two minds about it.
It knocks something loose.
It's a little inconvenient.
Yeah, it's very inconvenient.
Yeah, I mean, you do have a knife in your hand.
Yeah, true.
Are you an onion crier?
Oh, yeah. I make my husband cut our onions, and I leave the kitchen. I'm extremely, extremely sensitive to it, but I really like cooked onions, so it tends to find its way into a lot of dishes we make. I'm fine with it, though. It just gives me a chance to sit down while he does something else.
I feel like some onions, they provoke crying just more.
Yeah.
But it's also definitely a canary in a coal mine situation with the sharpness of your knives. Like if you're crying every single time, it probably means you need to just,
I've tried the freezing trick too. Like I've put it in the freezer before cutting, and that helped a little bit, I think, but I don't know if I just wanted it to. I don't know.
Maybe it was a mild onion.
Yeah,
it's hard to know.
Maybe I should do that more often and see if it actually works.
There's all kinds of fun tricks. There's you can even buy onion goggles too.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Well, here's one weird trick. Have bad vision, and you need glasses. And, not exactly problem solved, obviously, since I cry, but yeah.
But do you think it helps?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can just see the onion juices on the surface of my.
Whoa. Okay.
Sometimes. Maybe I don't.
I had no idea. Through the world through John's eyes.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
No one knows. Never mind.
Shannon, what did you do this week? Well, you were traveling this week.
Yeah, I was traveling for work and also watching my nephews while traveling for work. So I did not do much cooking, but that's okay. We were in Seattle and there's
so much
plenty
good
of good
food.
food up there. Yeah. So I wasn't I wasn't sad about it. But before we left, we did make minestrone soup. And it was because there's this pizza restaurant here in Portland called Vincenzo's, and they have a little Italian market to the side. And one time, I don't know why, but they had Barbie themed alphabet pasta. What? And I grabbed a bag of it because I was like, dried alphabet pasta. Oh my gosh, the possibilities are endless. So we made minestrone soup, but added little cute alphabet
Barbie. Is it just the letter? It was just
Barbie. It was just the packaging was Barbie themed. They had all of the letters.
Okay.
But it made it really fun to eat the soup because you were getting spoonfuls, and it reminded me of being a kid. I don't know, and eating alphabet soup. It was so fun. So I think I'm going to buy it more often. And then we had plenty for leftovers. We had it multiple times before I left.
Were you tempted to make words out of a spoonful?
No, I was too hungry and impatient. What about you two? Any fun things you cooked?
I mean, really, the big thing was our friend and former guest on the podcast, Anna Johns. We had her over for her birthday. I tried to recreate. Well, I feel like the last episode we were talking about,
Yes.
this.
It was like a crispy potato taco.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So the potatoes are almost crushed or roughly mashed, and then in a crispy taco with a carrot slaw.
But wasn't it a double layer, like a flour tortilla and then a corn tortilla? Mm-hmm. Yeah, anyways. I didn't try to do that, but there's this amazing place called Tito's Taquitos. It's on Swan Island, and I think that they are opening another location to replace the one that they lost. Anyways, they serve these really nice crispy taquitos / flautas. I mean, some people call them that. And they're filled with potato. And then they do a nice guisado on top, a stew. What do they offer? I feel like there's a shredded pork, I think, a cochinita type situation.
Or you can get them vegetarian and just I can't remember because I did order them that way, but now I don't remember what was on top, which is a very fun story.
Yeah. Cool story. Anyways, so yeah, made some potato taquitos for the first time. So that was a nice learning experience. And then we, topped it with a chicken chili verde because we have a bunch of frozen New Mex chilies from the good folks at Peppered Earth at the Portland Farmers Market. It was like kind of a production, and it ended up turning out
They were delicious.
Really good.
Sounds so good.
And then the next night, you turned them into an enchilada situation by topping them with that chicken chili verde and some cheese, and then baking them to kind of re-crisp the edges. That was also delicious.
It was really good. And it just proves yet another data point that if you crisp something up and then you sog it out, for some reason it just ends up better.
Yeah, it's twice as delicious. And this week, for a couple weeks now, I've been trying very hard to be consistent about publishing a Substack newsletter. It's a meal planning newsletter. I have kind of let it fall off my plate for a long time because I have a full-time job, and it's sometimes hard to have the creativity left to do that kind of writing. But I'm trying to be more consistent about it. And it's just kind of about the meals, how I meal plan, and how basically philosophies of cooking and of meal planning, and how to make cooking like less, basically how to like shop at the grocery store less, how to spend less money, how to make cooking less stressful for folks who find it stressful. And each week kind of has a little different theme, but then I share my my meal plan. And you can find it at joyofcooking.substack.com. But yeah, I'm going to be publishing that hopefully weekly.
And I know I'm a little bit biased, obviously, but I love it so much. I've shared it with so many of my coworkers, for example. I just think it's really, really helpful, and it's really well written, and it's really nice to just read something helpful, and it reads well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So this week, it's a very special episode because we have as our guest today, Dirk Marshall, who also happens to be married to our producer and who has his very own podcast, which we will talk about. But Dirk is half of the team behind the Portland, Oregon-based hot sauce company, Marshall's Hot Sauce. He is also the host of VH Us, a podcast where he discusses a different cult film every week with a guest whose profession is portrayed sometimes very loosely in the film. Dirk, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, as you've had so many talented cookbook authors and recipe writers, but nobody from my side of the table, the people that need the recipes. That's what I'm here to bring.
We all need recipes.
I do. I'm like, there's, when Dumbo, the elephant Dumbo, has the feather, and that's what helps it fly. Only when it loses the feather, it had the strength to fly it the whole time, and its heart. If I lose the recipe, I order pizza.
It's in there, Dirk. It's in your heart.
It is not. I make terrible choices. If my wife and daughter aren't here, I put string cheese in a cold tortilla. It's bad.
Wait,
so
string cheese in a cold tortilla. Do you put any hot sauce on there or anything?
Sometimes French's mustard.
Oh.
I am so confused by you right now.
And I eat it cold and sad in the kitchen. And I just say, moving on. And that's basically what my wife's nodding. It's bad, but I love recipes. I love cookbooks, and they help me out so much. So I love listening to this podcast and hearing what goes into writing it. Watching my wife write recipes boggles my mind because I just don't have that skill set. I don't know.
But you're very good at following recipes, I hear.
Oh, I follow it to the T, which makes me perfect for testing recipes.
Yeah.
Because Sarah can give me a recipe and I will cook it, and then she looks at it and goes, "That's what happens?" And I say, "That's what I did." And she's like, "I need to change this recipe." And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I set timers. I follow things to the T. And it's like so, like when I'm at the farmer's market, I'll see like a child. I'm the child in the situation. And they'll come up and they don't know how to sample the hot sauce. And we have chips in a bowl, tongs for the chips, and then the sauce is in a bowl with a spoon. So there's some moving pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a kid once get the tongs because the parents said, "Get the tongs." And he's like, "Okay." And he gets the tongs. And they're like, "Get the chip." And he gets the chip and the tongs. And then the parents started talking to somebody else. And I saw the kid panic and then just slowly put the tongs with the chip into their mouth. And that's like me. Like I'm following the recipe. And then if it's then like, then it's done. I'm like, I don't know what did I miss? Did I I don't, and I'll just look at the thing in the pan, and I'm like, they didn't say take it out of the pan. Ooh, like it's bad. But
That is kind of my worst nightmare, is to write a recipe where it's like the equivalent of talking to somebody else, and the reader is left putting a chip into their mouth with a pair of tongs.
I just want to stand in the kitchen and watch you follow a recipe one day.
It is. Everything has to happen once at a time. If a recipe says 20-minute prep, 40-minute cook time, I'm there 4 hours. Like, I do everything individually. The good thing is I love the breaking down of vegetables and things. I love the mise en place of everything. Like, I geek out over it, and it's very therapeutic for me. So I don't mind the time, but I just know if something's like a simple soup with one pan, it's like 2 loads of the dishwasher. Like, everything is it's going to be a scene. Yeah.
Vegetable prep really is me time, or you time, you know, whoever's doing it time. Really enjoy it. I always feel like I'm always trying to find ways to just like vary it up a little, like maybe not necessarily make it more efficient, but I'll just try cutting things differently, like every other time or whatever. I mean, sometimes I'm, you know, more inspired than others, but I'm not talking like, getting really creative with your chopped onion, but
You're not sitting there and tourneing a little potato into a perfect ball or something.
yeah, that is like the undesirable endpoint of such inquiry.
I do that with onions specifically, though. I'm like, is there a better way to cut this onion? And then I just like switch it up all the time. I know that there's the right way, but sometimes it doesn't feel like the right way. And
Do you ever do
For an infomercial.
There must be a better way.
there must be.
Do you ever do the thing where you cut it? I don't know how quite to describe it, but you cut the onion in half, and then you hold your knife at an angle and cut it almost like
Radiating from the center.
but you cut it like this, and then
No.
kind of so that
That's
all the
actually,
pieces turn out to be basically the same size, but you don't have to do that thing where you cut it horizontally and then cut it vertically.
That actually has a name, Lyon style.
Oh.
Yeah, like I guess
Sounds so
that's
fancy.
how it's taught to cooks in Lyon.
Okay.
I please, listeners, correct me gently.
Don't say that.
Nicely.
You know that.
I will say I do have onion goggles, and they
You
work
do?
really well. Yeah, I have these nice tortoiseshell ones that.
Oh my God.
Of course they're stylish.
Yeah, they're lovely. They work really well, and I don't let anyone else wear them.
But you wear glasses.
I take them off for that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
You're a brave man.
yeah. Most people say that.
Dirk, what are your favorite things to cook, like types of dishes?
So there's 2 things that sort of pull me into the kitchen. One of them is something that's very simple and easy to cook for my family. So like a chicken pot pie soup in a crock pot that I can then crisp up something to top it with when we're ready to have dinner. That's like a simple go-to. But another thing that draws me is like individual ingredients in recipes that I'm not familiar with, or like maybe a technique. So something like there was a recipe where you grated fresh ginger into cream cheese and then used steamed cabbage leaves and then topped that with like a chili crisp. And that was such a bizarre thing that I was like, I have to make that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think I've ever forgotten.
Was it good?
It was super good. It was
That
really
sounds
good.
really good.
And the key piece, you could serve it at room temperature. So I didn't have
Oh,
to
that's
stress out.
awesome. I love
Oh.
I
that.
could make everything individually. And then when it's time to eat, just like throw it on a platter and it looks all pretty and you drizzle things. And who doesn't like to drizzle?
I still remember. I think it was the first time that we were over here and had something that you prepared, and it was like a roti style flatbread where you had coiled, did the rolling up of the dough. I guess it's kind of
coiling
laminated.
it and then rolling it out again. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I should do that again. That was
Yeah.
a fun process that had a great payoff.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. How often do you cook dinner every week?
You know, it depends. We try to balance it with like Sarah's the person who drives in our family. So if she's running the kiddo around, then I'll try to like figure out something to make so that we're not just ordering Pizza Cat all the time, which is not a bad thing. But so a couple times a week. And I'll try to find things that I'm like inspired by, or sometimes that's from a restaurant we went to. Sometimes it's because our kid will be like, I want onigiri. And I'm like, cool, I got that. And I have like the rice recipe where I soak the rice and then I rinse the rice and then I, set the timer. We've already covered my timer issue. And then again, you can have it at room temperature. So that's like a win-win. Because I get stressed out too if there's like, if I got two things going and then they're like, oh, there's traffic. And I'm like, everything's going to be cold. Like it's just, and nobody cares. It's just an implied pressure I put on myself. Everyone's just happy to eat food. So.
I just really appreciate how self-aware you are.
Yeah.
Well, I think about it detrimentally a lot.
All right, so let's try our little snack today. So today's episode's theme is shallots. So we are going to try, actually, Dirk, could you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, this is a recipe from Joy of Cooking. It's the roasted shallot recipe, and I did complete the entire recipe by doing the maple balsamic optional glaze on there. And just so you know, I do read the recipes in your voices. So thanks for being in the kitchen with me. And then Sarah had this idea because I had also made the minestrone soup from the book. I looked for the section that was older recipes that were included in this edition, and that's where I found that, which was delicious, by the way. But she said put the shallots on bread, baguette, and then a little grated Gruyere and Parmesan on top, and then pop that in the oven. So that's what we have here.
They look beautiful.
Yeah,
They're
it is
very
like
browned.
French onion soup appetizer.
Yeah, that's what she said. And I was like, we love French onion soup. And I will say this recipe was like one of my favorite things because the vegetable itself is pretty gorgeous once you peel it and everything. So you got a good starting block. And then you put it in there with the olive oil, simple seasoning, and it just roasts perfectly. You don't have to flip anything or do anything. And then when you pull it out and then you glaze it, so satisfying. So satisfying to glaze it. And then it just comes out so beautifully. You don't get a lot of maple. I was like, I'm not a big maple guy. But that blended with the balsamic is really great.
How long did it take to make this, do you think?
This didn't take me a long time.
I feel like it'd be a really good option for just like appetizer if you have friends coming over or something.
Yeah, and again, because like you can roast it ahead of time, and then when you're ready to do the whole cheese situation, it kind of warms it up. So no pressure there.
And the only prep you're really doing is peeling some shallots, which, I mean, that can vary depending on how small the shallots are. But
they're so
pretty,
sweet.
pretty low effort.
They taste amazing.
Really good.
They get very caramelized and golden, and they're just so sweet, and but also with that, like that onion sweet savoriness. You're laughing at my description.
That was very apt.
John, could you talk a little bit about what Dirk mentioned about the classic recipes?
So yeah, in the index for the latest edition, 2019 edition, we took some prior research. I mean, when we were testing recipes, we would do these, what we called them genealogies, where we would try to trace back the recipe to the edition where it was first added. There was a huge number of recipes that were added in 1936. And so we felt like it was a good idea to create a list of recipes that had been in the book since that second edition. The 31 edition, there are definitely like plenty of recipes. Like I want to say it's like 150.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Something like that have been in every edition since in one form or another. I mean, they obviously have changed a little bit, hopefully for the better. So if anyone's interested in seeing some of the ones that have been around since the 30s, just look in your index. It's under classic recipes.
I do have a question, and maybe this isn't a classic recipe, but when did or how long have or are there issues that don't have the skinning of a squirrel?
What? What was the question?
I came across the skinning of a squirrel in the book.
Sure.
And I was just curious, this is a thing?
It is like the most infamous, illustration that we've had in the book, like bar none. For sure, there is an illustration in the 63 edition and the 75 edition that really captured the imagination of a lot of people.
Oh, no.
It shows, the illustrations are cool.
Cool illustration. It shows a bad technique.
A technique we no longer recommend for skinning a squirrel, but where you put your boot, your very stylish hunting boot, presumably, on the squirrel to help you pull the skin off. But we don't recommend that technique anymore. There's a better way of doing it, which we talk about in the 2019 edition. But we do not have an illustration anymore for that. Yeah,
and we talk about it in the context of rabbits.
Right.
Because people actually do raise rabbits for food, not just pets. We definitely talk about it there. And, the technique that we recommend now was taught to us. It was a very grotesque afternoon. But
We don't have to go into great detail.
We don't have to go into
We learned
great
a good
detail.
technique, so we changed it in the book. However, ever since the illustration was taken out in the 90s, people have complained about it not being there.
Really?
Not because we think people are actually wanting to do that. We don't think most people are doing that.
It's just like that typical like decline narrative, like, you know, oh, it's no longer an authentic American classic because it doesn't have the man stomping on the squirrel's tail or whatever.
So this is a little bit of weird, I don't know what to call it, but when the 2019 edition was coming out, we were promoting it and we sent the book, or our publisher sent the book to all these different people, like influencers and stuff, to like promote it on social media. And they sent one to Alton Brown. And all he said about it was, it doesn't have the squirrel illustration, which made me kind of mad because I was like, you know, we took it out for a reason. We don't want this book to be a museum piece. We want it to be a useful book that people can actually reference, not just a trove of like silly antique things that nobody's ever going to use. And so not taking it out wasn't like trying to be, I don't know, like PC or something. It was really just like, this is not a good technique anymore. We added a better technique for the rabbit that also applies to squirrel. And there are reasons why we took it out, not just because we were being curmudgeonly. But yeah, we really just want the book to be super useful and up to date with its information. But we do know of at least one person who has that illustration tattooed on their body.
Oh,
Wow.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is it Alton Brown?
It is not.
Oh, okay.
Well, you know, we should have Alton, you know, on the show just to
Yeah,
make
we can
sure.
talk about it.
Ask if he has that tattoo.
Makes sense. My mother always said there's more than one way to skin a squirrel, and to know you'll have to turn to page 347. It's not the right page number.
We only have one method because it is the best method. We don't want people to waste time with a substandard
Exactly.
skinning method.
But before we move into the actual interview segment, I just wanted to talk about the recipe of the week that we made this past week, which was broccoli casserole. John, since you made the broccoli casserole, could you talk, because I know you did some things a little differently than the recipe says.
Yeah, of course. It's hard not to just mess with recipes. Dirk, you say that you follow recipes pretty closely, but do you ever have the inkling to just like, oh no, I'm going to second guess, or I'm going to embellish this with something that I have on hand? Maybe you're not going out of your way, but you do a substitution that makes sense because you have it.
No, that's a thoughtful question. No is the answer. I actually got sweaty when you said you love messing with recipes. I was like, I can't even deal with this. You gotta follow the words and the numbers. That's how we get the tasty.
Well, yeah, the broccoli cheese casserole recipe is definitely one of those ones. It's a classic. I think it was in the 1931 edition and has been in every edition since. Let's just say that times have changed. For instance, Irma back in the 30s, she's like, cook your broccoli, par cook, steam your broccoli. Actually, I think it was boiling. Chop it fine, put it through a sieve if you want.
So
I'm
basically
sorry.
puree
It's
it.
basically a puree, which,
No.
I mean, we did not carry that through to the 2019, though we do say to chop it pretty finely. So I just decided, first of all, that I wanted a coarser chop, recognizable florets, not whole florets,
Just roughly chopped.
somewhere in between. And also, instead of steaming / boiling, I wanted to roast broccoli because the oven's going to be on anyway. And it just so happens that the roasting temperature that we recommend for broccoli is the same baking temperature that we recommend for the casserole. So I made those changes, and then we have some fancy cheese around. So I ended up making the bechamel / Mornay sauce, the flour thickened milk sauce with cheese in it. Ended up making it with a little bit of raclette cheese, and then also just a tiny bit of a funky bloomy cheese.
Called Brebis Russe.
What was
It's
that again?
It's a sheep's milk cheese called Brebis Russe.
I love that word.
It's really pretty. It has like an orange rind, like an edible rind, and it's a very soft, stinky cheese. But it was really good in the cheese sauce. But that just kind of shows you, like, you can tweak a recipe like that because it's so basic. You can add, like, you could use cheddar instead of whatever the recipe recommended. Cheddar and broccoli go super well together. You could use Gruyere. You could use kind of whatever you have within reason.
I did not mess with the crushed cornflake and Romano cheese topping, though.
That's solid. But I did think it needed more. I wanted more of the crunchy.
Well, you kind of wanted more of everything. You wanted more sauce, and you wanted,
More cowbell. You made it too, Shannon, right?
Yeah. Well, my husband led the charge because he does follow recipes better than I do, and I recognize that, and I wanted him to follow it. I will say that we also roughly chopped the broccoli because I really love broccoli. I like the texture of it, but we steamed it. I like the flavor of vegetables, and steaming them, I feel like, really brings out the flavor of vegetables. So we stuck with the recipe, except we roughly chopped the broccoli. I think other than that, we followed it exactly. My only note was, I think for us, we just needed some more like fun spices. I don't know, maybe some paprika or something, just for our palate. But I think it's an excellent way to get a lot of vegetables in kids' bellies because it was delicious, but it wasn't overly complicated. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. And then we paired it with crispy chicken thighs and a massage kale salad on the side. And it was just a really well-rounded meal. And there wasn't so much cheese sauce that it felt like it was drowning in the cheese sauce, which I appreciated. It felt like I was still getting my like vegetables in.
Yeah, double the brassicas, double the fun.
Well, that's our motto in our house.
I forgot. I ended up adding some red pepper flakes to the top.
Yeah, like something like that would be really good. Yeah.
That's very typical.
The cornflake topping was so delicious, though.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, and now we have a big box of cornflakes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Cornflake recipes.
More toppings coming down the pike. Maybe some breading situations.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. So if you made the broccoli casserole, thanks for cooking along. This week's recipe, since our theme is shallots, this week's recipe is crispy fried shallots. You can find that recipe on page 256 of the 2019 edition. As a reminder, each week we'll feature a recipe from the 2019 edition of Joy of Cooking that aligns with our weekly theme. You're invited to cook along. Feel free to tag us at The Joy of Cooking or use the hashtag Joy Scouts Cooking Club. All right, Dirk, questions. What's your relationship to the Joy of Cooking cookbook? Is it a book you grew up with, or did you come to it a little later?
Yeah, so it's the one cookbook I remember my mother having. I think it's, everyone says it's iconic. And yeah, that's what I remember. I remember her having Joy of Cooking, using it in the kitchen. And other than that, just her own pages and pages of like handwritten and like recipe cards and, stuff that, every home cook making food for a family has their annotated little, casseroles and things. Yeah, everyone loves the handwriting and the one she would get from like my grandma and stuff where it's like a little picture of a loaf of bread that's like, and then but yeah, that's the one cookbook that I remember.
Do you remember any specific things she would make out of it?
God, I don't. I'm sure she'd be like this, and this, but like as a kid, you don't really take note of that. You're just like stoked for spaghetti.
Right.
Should be like on my tombstone.
Stoked for spaghetti.
Yeah. It's a good way to live.
Speaking of, have you seen the tombstones that have recipes on them?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a whole thing. I cannot remember the person's name now, but they have an Instagram where they go around to graveyards and find people's tombstones with recipes on them, and then they make the recipe. And sometimes they even get in touch with like the family of the person and make the food and bring it and share it. It's really cool,
That's
actually.
like the most lovely thing
It's
I've
so
heard in so long. I love that.
Yeah. What recipe would you put on your tombstone?
I'm very into chilled soba noodle salads.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And lately I've been putting that 50 hertz green Szechuan peppercorn oil on them. And I'm eating too much now. I can't keep the portions under control because I'm just like, no one's looking, and I just keep shoveling it in my face, and I love it.
And you've developed a tolerance for the oil now, so
It's so
got to amp it up.
It's so good. That's the one thing, John, that I've added to a recipe where it made things better.
Oh.
Yeah. Everything else I'm like measuring, I'm like just the right amount of oil to vinegar and,
Well, yeah, it sounds like that kind of falls under the condiment tray.
Yes. Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure. I was proud for
you're
a
still
second.
following the
Yeah.
recipes.
All right. I'm a sheep.
Well, no, I feel like that's one of the benefits of having the condiment tray at hand is that you can rebel.
Yes.
If things don't turn out the way you want, you can ameliorate your circumstances.
Exactly.
So, Dirk, you are a podcast host.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about your show?
Yeah, so I grew up in a video store in the 80s. My dad had a mom and pop video store. And, I had like a little travel TV and a VCR under a table by our popcorn machine, and I could just pull movies from the shelves and watch them. And that's like greatly impacted my life and how I communicate to people, how I relate day to day situations, for better or worse. So it's just something that I'm passionate about. And I wanted to start a podcast where it was just all about celebrating films. There's a lot of things, podcasts and shows where they make fun of movies and that kind of stuff, which is whatever you want to do. But like a lot of times that's the budgetary restrictions or, the time that they had to make it. And I wanted to make something that like if someone came across something they did 40 years ago in their life, they could feel proud to listen to it and hear it celebrated rather than like, look how dumb you look in clothes in the 70s or whatever it is, that people poke fun at. Mm-hmm. And I just think everyone has an interesting life and profession. It's only boring because it's our own. And so, by talking to a lot of our friends are chefs. And so I was like, hey, will you come on my podcast and we'll talk about a movie? And they, agree. So I had Aaron Barnett from St. Jack, and he came on and we talked about Who's Killing the Great Chefs of Europe, which is a film from 1978, directed by Ted Kotcheff, who also did First Blood and Weekend at Bernie's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, varied.
Quite a filmography.
Varied. It's got George Segal and Jacqueline Bisset in it, and it's about a murderer who's going around killing chefs in the style of their signature dish.
Oh.
Yeah, like $150,000 of the budget went just to the food, which was all made by Paul Bocuse, most notably credited as the sort of godfather of Nouvelle cuisine, like the lighter version of traditional French. He was also the inspiration for Auguste Gusteau in 2007's Ratatouille, if you've seen that amazing cartoon. So I reached out to his chef de cuisines, where he was a consultant at like a Scotch Lodge. And so I asked them, how would he die? And so that was super fun. And because they loved to answer that for their boss. And so that's a fun example. I also had him back for the menu to talk about the dishes in that film, just to be like, what do you think of, just to pick your brain. We cover everything from an exterminator talking about what a bad day is like for them, which is really gross. If you didn't like the squirrel segment of this podcast, you're not going to like that episode. But yeah, it's been really fun. I enjoy it.
What movie was that for?
That was for Of Unknown Origin, a film from with Peter Weller, who everyone knows from RoboCop, and he encounters a killer rat in his house, and he needs some help. Boy, does he! And so we had an exterminator on, and wow, disgusting. Not for a food podcast.
Wait, I want to backtrack a little bit to the episode that you had Aaron Barnett on. Like what was his signature dish and how would he be murdered? Yeah,
well, you'll have to listen to it, but I will say he is so fascinating because he has St. Jack, which is like a high-end,
such a good restaurant,
French restaurant, but he is a rebel in that he loves to be playful. The clientele kind of dictated, and he says it in the episode, that, he wanted to do these fun things, but people were like, we want the foie gras, we want the this, we want the that. And so it becomes sort of higher end, but he can't help himself. So he'll do things like a whole fish head fried with French fries shoved in the face of it with a rich French sauce. And like, he'll do high-lows with caviar served with Pringles. It's like, he's just such a fun, unpretentious person. Great to sit at the pass and watch the different stations work because the things that they come up with are unbelievable. So yeah, it was pretty gross the way that they thought he would die. But
we don't have to get into it. I will listen to the podcast.
It was very fun. If people don't want gross, I did do an episode on Tampopo. Two, actually. One of them with Gabe Rosen that had Nora Neko at the time, so he was the broth episode. And then Lola that has Umi Organic, and so she was the noodle component to that episode. So we did both those. And one I really have to highlight is Little Forest that I recorded that episode with my wife. And that's a movie from South Korea that people can find. And have any of you seen Little Forest? No. It's such a lovely, sweet movie. No high drama, no high stakes. It's about a woman who has gone to the city. She moves back to her small house that she grew up in the rural area. And through the months, she reconnects to her family and food through gardening and cooking. And it's some of the most beautiful Korean food you'll ever see photographed. Anyone I've told to watch this movie is like, this is what I needed.
Oh.
Like, it's something that I think, if you're stressed and you want something to watch where you're just like, I got all the feels.
Yeah.
Like Little Forest is.
I was going to ask you what your favorite food-themed movie is. Do you think that's it?
That's probably it. Because Tampopo is really fun and everything, but it has a lot of adult subject matter that I forget about until I recommend it to someone. And they're like, that egg scene was a lot. And I'm like, you're right. I forgot about that part.
We, when my parents were visiting, we decided to watch it, and I had forgotten about all of that stuff. And then I was like, oh, yeah, it all came flooding back. I was
does,
like,
too late.
I'm so sorry. It's so awkward to watch something like that with your parents.
Yeah, that was pretty awkward.
Yeah, Little Forest doesn't have that. And unlike a lot of movies, usually if they deal with food, it's about really chefs and restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And it's less like, yeah, you'll see a picture of some food or, some shots of food in there. But Little Forest is really like making your kimchi and,
I love that.
making a salad with these edible flowers. And you see the joy on the actress's face. And it's just impossible to not like love it,
Adding that to my list.
I just
right
wrote it
now.
down. I might be watching it tonight.
I hope a lot of people
feel
do.
like
Yeah, it's
That's what I need right now in my
same
life.
here.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of us do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds great.
Do you like to eat snacks while you watch movies?
I don't. I'm so weird. I don't like to do anything. I like to sit completely motionless and just give myself to the film that I'm watching. My wife is nodding. People love to eat and drink during movies, and I find it all heavily distracting. And so I just,
Do you drink water?
not really. I watch a lot of scary movies too, and I just want the full ride.
Yeah.
Like, that's my whole thing. And so, yeah, anything that pulls me away from it is I'm like, get out
Wow.
of here.
God, you are a rare breed.
Yeah.
I'm a mess, but consistent. That's good.
Self-aware.
Yes. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. But movie snacks, I would love it if I was into them. My favorite thing is when we watch television things to turn our brain off at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So not related to the podcast or anything. Also, I'm taking notes a lot of times with movies, and I can be snacking at the same time, because my favorite snack for that entertainment time is when we make popcorn together. And I love to make popcorn in the air popper, but I do something that I don't think a lot of people do, and that's season the bowl. So I take butter and I rub it around the outside of the bowl, and I season it with the salt and stuff, because both my wife and daughter love to get a kernel and drag it up the side of the bowl.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. And then we air pop it, and then we toss it with the nutritional yeast and depending on what Sarah's into at the time. If there's no kiddo, we're putting our volcano sparkle from Marshall's hot sauce in there. Get it nice and spicy.
What's in the
That is a
volcano sparkle?
fine seasoning.
Yeah,
Ah,
talk a
thank
little
you.
more about that.
It's all my wife's favorite hot chilies. She dehydrates them, grinds them into a powder with a little citric acid and sea salt. So it's like a dry hot sauce people could keep in their desk, essentially, and just add to whatever you want. And I'm telling you, I've made mac and cheese with my daughter once a week since she could eat solid foods. If I'm being transparent, I read the box every time. But she knows that it's a little boring for me, so she'll get our bird's eye basil out of the fridge, and she'll get the volcano sparkle, and she'll church it up for me. And
Oh.
it's
That's awesome.
really nice. Sometimes that spills out, and it's very spicy, but I enjoy the ride.
You can really get in trouble with the volcanoes.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is
it is no joke.
Yes.
The name of it is just my favorite, though.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
Makes you happy.
It's fun because there's a demographic of people that come to a hot sauce counter, and they're like, what do you got that's the hottest? And it's so fun to hear that voice say, I'll get a volcano sparkle. It's like, it's me every time.
Yeah, I feel like that is a product that you guys must have developed just to have an answer for those folks where there would be no like, oh, that's nothing.
Yeah. What's funny is, so the top floor of our home is where we live. The ground floor is where the commercial kitchen and podcast studio and stuff are. So it was like midnight. I was watching something on probably a found footage horror movie or something, and my wife just pops up the spiral staircase in gloves and goggles, and she's like, do you want to try what I just made? And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm watching a terrifying film right now. Yes, what is it? And it was volcano sparkle, and I was like, this is amazing.
Brilliant.
Where do you even think up this stuff? I don't know where she gets it, but
What is your history with hot sauce? Have you always liked hot, spicy
no,
foods?
when we met, we basically knew like probably Cholula or Tapatio from burrito spots. Maybe what's the one that starts with a V? I can't even think.
Valentino?
Valentino.
Yeah.
You know, I call them gateway sauces because they usually lead people into spicier territory. That really was it. And it wasn't, I mean, you can listen to her episode to hear about habanero carrot curry, but that was like the thing that started it all. And just yesterday, she made haluski, and I doused it in habanero carrot curry, and it was amazing.
Oh, haluski.
Yeah.
Might need to make that again.
And douse it in hot sauce.
It's really good in the butter.
Yeah. Let's answer our question of the week. Sarah, can you read the question, please?
I was shopping recently for shallots and they were out. I bought pearl onions instead. Do you think this is a good replacement or do you have a better one? Do you have any recipes with pearl onions?
From a prep perspective, it's a horrible substitute.
Yeah,
'Cause
even
peeling
more appealing.
Yeah, peeling pearl onions is really horrible. But yeah, it really is kind of an it depends question. I feel like for a recipe like this, the one that we had a little taste of, the roasted shallots, you could definitely roast pearl onions like that. You know, you'd have to adjust the cooking time a little bit, but yeah, they would be great. But yeah, the downside, peeling. For roasting, if you want to substitute something for shallots, the two options that come to mind are cipollini onions, which are kind of the donut-shaped ones, kind of flattened looking. They're delicious. They're a little sweeter than shallots. And then the other kind of roasted substitute that came to mind for me, at least, were the torpedo-shaped tropia onions, which are redder. They usually have greens attached, and they're usually around farmers markets. So it's not exactly the easiest one to find.
Yeah, I feel like the downside is those are both harder to find than shallots or pearl onions.
I mean, cipollinis store well at least, so
Yeah.
there's a chance that, you know, a fancier market might have them. Those would definitely be the easier ones to find.
But then I was thinking about it, and if a recipe calls for a shallot and I don't have one, I'll just use a regular onion. Or if I have a red onion, I feel like a red onion's a really good substitute, especially if you're just going to chop it or slice it and saute it, or it's in a recipe where you're not going to super notice the difference. I'll just use an onion. I thought it was interesting. Julia Child actually recommended in Mastering the Art of French Cooking, she recommended using the white part of scallions instead of shallots, which I think is kind of a weird substitute because they're totally different.
Well, it goes back to, I feel like there's, just after perusing, like, I don't know how many cookbooks and, you know, in the time that we've been working on the book, there seems to be this opinion that shallots are mild
I disagree.
and or milder than just a storage onion. And
My eyes disagree.
Yeah, my eyes
no,
disagree.
I was crying. I actually, in my intro, I said that I cry when sometimes I cry. Well, it was a shallot. It's a dang
It's
shallot.
always a shallot for me.
And yeah, I actually substituted a shallot for the broccoli cheese casserole dish because it calls for a small onion minced, and we just happen to have like a fairly large shallot.
Yeah, I would just substitute a regular onion. You had a good point though, John, when we were talking about this earlier, is that if you're using the shallot in like a lot of times vinaigrettes will have like minced shallot in them, then I would probably use a red onion specifically, like minced really fine.
Yeah, especially for like mignonette and stuff, because like I feel like mignonette kind of needs that color for some reason. I don't
No,
know.
I agree.
It needs to be that light pink color. I wrote that in my notes, honestly, just because I feel like mignonette is the best way to eat a shallot. I could drink mignonette. I really could. I'd top it on, just put it on everything, and I'd be
It's
happy.
a drinking vinegar. Sure. That's a thing.
But a lot of it, I mean, yeah, that light pink color just makes you kind of happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes me want oysters right now.
Yeah.
But as for pearl onion recipes, since it sounds like you probably have some left over, we do have in the book a creamed pearl onion recipe. That's really good. It's pretty simple. It kind of reminds me of the broccoli casserole a little bit because you cook the onions and then you make a simple like white sauce and then bake it in a dish with cheese on top. It's a really good like Thanksgiving-y kind of side dish.
Yeah, what could go wrong? I mean, you serve
exactly.
that. It doesn't have to be like a side for a big meal. You could just, if you were, trying to eat your feelings, some nice crusty bread and some creamed pearl onions might do the trick. You never know. When I think of pearl onions and how I want to eat them, I think about coq au vin and I think about beef bourguignon. But those are super involved. It's like the pearl onions are almost kind of beside the point, even though they end up being like a highlight for me.
Oh, I love them. That's one of my favorite parts of like coq au vin is getting the little pearl onions.
But it's like the last step of those recipes is, you you are sautéing in butter. You're sautéing peeled pearl onions and mushrooms to add to the stew at the last second, or I mean, maybe I think we call for like a little bit of simmering time to marry the flavors, but I mean, why not just do like that mushroom, pearl onion, butter saute by itself, and then add it to something?
Or just that would be a good side.
It would be a great side. It would be great for topping like mashed potatoes or something, or even roasted potatoes, baked potatoes.
Can also pickle them,
Yeah, pickling.
as you can pickle pretty much everything, it feels like. But
It's like a get out of jail free card. You can just pickle it.
you just pickle it. Also, put it in a cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
Have a lovely evening.
Gibson.
There you go.
Yeah, I love a dirty martini, or I guess it's a Gibson, but you put a little bit of the brine into the martini, and then you garnish it with the pickled onion.
I think
Or you
pickled.
could split the difference and just do a little olive juice and
Sure.
a pickled onion. Yeah.
I just feel like pickled pearl onions would be a lovely gift to give somebody too. Just like a little jar. Pretty low, like work involved,
Yeah.
high value.
I will say that when you're pickling the pearl onions, I do recommend they sell pearl onions already peeled in the freezer section, which are great for if you're going to add it to a stew or something like that. But if you're going to pickle them, I don't recommend using them because they are like kind of cooked a little bit and they get mushy, and you really want them to be like crunchy.
Yeah, they're not cooked, but the freeze thaw definitely like
Right.
softens it a little bit. And frozen pearl onions, fantastic innovation. I hate peeling them.
We can
can't
kind of tell.
Well, there's this trick that supposedly makes it easier where you blanch them and shock them in ice water. And I mean, it makes it kind of easier, but it's also a pain. Just the whole thing. Ugh.
If you have a topic, ingredient, or joy story to share, call our hotline at 503-395-8858. Leave us a message or send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. Next week's topic comes from our caller.
I'm a farmer with a farmer's market stand selling my vegetables. People ask me how to cook my veggies. I know what I do, but I don't know how to write a recipe. Any good tips or format? Or can I make copies from Joy? Is that breaking the law? So many questions. Send help.
We will answer that question next time. That's a really good question. All right, everybody. What are we looking forward to this coming week?
I saw somebody on Instagram. So I don't eat beef very often, but when I do, I like it to be really, really good. So tonight I'm going to make a steak and pair it with some roasted potatoes and roasted fennel with like lemon and white wine and an herby chimichurri sauce to put on the steak. And it just sounds nice. And then also planning a camping trip next weekend. So I'm going to start thinking about things that I will be wanting to make maybe over the fire because it's going to be really, really cold, and to share with friends, you two included.
I'm very excited. I couldn't think of a single thing because I do my meal planning normally on Sunday afternoon, so I just haven't gotten there yet. But I am starting to plan my garden for this year, and so that's occupying a lot of my brain. It's just like, what am I going to plant? Where am I going to put it? My big project this year is going to be trying to plant okra here. This is not a great climate for okra. It really likes heat and humidity. So we have a pretty short season and our nights are colder than they are in like the South. So my solution for that, hopefully, is going to be putting some raised beds along the side of our driveway so that the heat from the concrete can hopefully help them along.
Yeah.
But I love okra so much, and you just don't see it as much here. A few farmers grow it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know what to do with it, but I really miss it. So I'm looking forward to that. And I also found a variety of okra that supposedly fruits in a shorter amount of time, so it doesn't need quite as long of a season. So all of those things hopefully will help me.
I may be following up with questions about that.
Well, if I have success, there should be plenty of okra.
Fantastic.
So
Yeah, I can't wait for some prolific okra plants. I feel like we've been missing out on that for a decade now.
yeah. What about you, Dirk?
Oh, we recently went to one of our favorite restaurants, Jeju, and anytime we go, I get so excited, one, to come back because this was a special event for Lunar New Year. And so I couldn't get some of my favorite things like the fermented spicy bean paste. There's a sausage situation I dream about. They do this burger in a bun situation, like a steam bun thing. Have you had this?
No.
We should go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sold.
It's so good. So I get excited about doing some sort of like tteokbokki or something at home. And then I had this recipe I showed my wife because I was like, I can't get this out of my brain. I think we have to make this, but I know you'll make some changes to make it even better. And it's a mushroom lasagna with Chinese 5 spice.
Oh,
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, I'm like all about it. So
sounds really good.
that's what I'm hoping for this week. Stay tuned for
Rad.
how that went. And I'm crossing all my fingers and toes.
Thanks for listening to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by subscribing to the show and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Follow us at joyofcooking.substack.com and on Instagram at thejoyofcooking. Stay tuned for next week where we'll tackle recipe writing. And don't forget to make this week's recipe, crispy fried shallots. Call in with questions, hopes, history, or where you find joy in the kitchen. Our number is 503-395-8858. That's 503-395-8858.
And we could not do this without our fantastic team at the Joy of Creation production house. Thank you to Dave Drusky, our production coordinator, Haley Bowers, our audio engineer, and Sarah Marshall, our producer.